And also this story this afternoon at 6 minutes after 3. New research claims that Britain is heading towards populism due to more renters and non-graduates staying at home during election time. The gap in voter turnout between graduates and non-graduates has more than doubled since 2019. That only feels like 20 minutes ago. This is according to the Institute for Public Policy Research. The think tank suggests that democratic reforms, including giving foreign nationals the right to vote and holding elections on weekends, with Labour planning to extend voting rights for 16 and 17-year-olds, might do the trick. Let's speak to the author and sociologist Frank Furedi. Frank, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
I mean, it seems to me that if you do all of those things, it doesn't really do the trick. It just sort of almost gerrymanders something into place rather than what I thought the initiative should be, is to get more people interested in democracy.
Well, you know, this report is so flawed in every respect because all the evidence shows that whenever populists do well in an election, like in America or in Germany, Italy, places like that, the number of people who are voting, the proportion of the electorate that votes actually rises. So look at the high number of people that turned out for Trump, the high numbers that have recently voted in Europe. What it indicates to me is that whenever people feel strongly about something and want to vote for an alternative, they will come out and vote. The reason why so many people stayed at home in the last general election in Britain was because they were not inspired by any of the political parties.
Yeah.
They weren't inspired by the Conservatives or Labour or the Lib Dems. And what we have at the moment, and this is the big secret, is a gradual process of de-alignment, where people's connection with political parties has become weaker and weaker. They no longer take them very seriously. And it's in this context that populist parties can actually flourish, which is what the report is all about, because what they're worried about is reform benefiting from what's happening at the moment.
And of course, you know, reform managed to hoover up 4 million votes, which is significant stuff. And the smart money, Frank, says they will continue in that direction.
Yes, and not only that, where the report is also wrong is assuming that young people will vote for the Labour Party or vote for the left.
Yeah.
If you look at the recent patterns of elections in Europe, an interesting thing has evolved, which is that for the first time since the 1960s, instead of tending to move towards the left, which is what young people have tended to do, more and more young people are voting for the right or for populist parties. It's a kind of new counterculture where they basically are saying that we have enough of the old establishment. You know, we're going to shake things up a little bit. And that's why in Holland, in Sweden, in Italy, Germany, you have such a high proportion of young people voting for populist parties. And I think that's something that this report doesn't really grasp and understand, that we now live in a different world than the post-1960s generation.
If Labour go through with all of this, and it looks as if they will do, so you extend voting rights to 16 and 17-year-olds, you give foreign nationals the right to vote, then I mean, there is an argument that says Labour are home and dry, right? I mean, that's a fairly significant amount of people that would be included in just those two groups who are likely to then vote Labour.
Yeah, I think there's as you were suggesting, there's an explicit attempt to gerrymander and to change the electoral system so that you limit the influence of the middle-aged and the older generation, which tends to be more conservative, and somehow create a greater space for young people. But I think that this can backfire for the reasons that I've suggested, that in many parts of Europe, the young are rebelling against the old establishment, against the cultural elites as they now exist. You have that in the United States even, where a lot of young people voted for Trump rather than for the Democrats. So it's not so black and white. I think the really insidious aspect of this is you break down the distinction between citizens and non-citizens. So you no longer have a special status for being a British citizen. You become just like anybody who is living in France or the United States or India. Everybody's the same. Everybody's got the same responsibilities, even though these individuals have not played a role in building British society. They have not paid their taxes over the decades. They weren't part of a community here, but somehow they've parachuted in, and they've given exactly the same rights as somebody who's been living here all their life. I think that erosion of citizenship is a fundamental attack on democratic rights and democratic decision-making.
What do you think, Frank, just on the wider issue of people's political appetites or concerns changing? And I think you're correct in identifying that, you know, there is certainly a sense, whereas young people once upon a time, you know, if you're young, you vote left. If you're a bit older, you vote right, etc. And that's all been slightly muddled in the last few years. What do you think is behind that? I mean, the short answer is woke culture. The second answer, I suppose, alongside that would be immigration. That they'd be two big issues. Is it as simple as that, or is there something else going on?
I think those two issues are really important, but even more important, I think, is the loss of legitimacy of the mainstream parties of European societies. If you look at these parties, they've been around for decades and decades and decades. They had huge memberships. You look at the number of party members in the Conservative Party or the Labour Party, nothing like it used to be. And therefore, a vacuum has been created for parties that can speak the language of everyday life,
Sure.
who can connect with the problems of people, who understand that there are a lot of young people who are really disturbed by the fact that their communities is somehow fragmenting and coming apart, who really resent not being able to be openly British, you know, to fly the flag, to kind of feel proud about their country. And in other places in Europe, when people feel like that, they will move to the right. And that's why I think Holland is a very interesting example. It's a very liberal society, arguably more liberal than Britain is. And yet, the majority of young people under the age of 24, the largest sections of them voted for the Geert Wilders, the populist party, to the surprise of everybody. In Germany, the AfD gets a significant number of support from young people. So I think something very interesting is changing, and our traditional image of long-haired young people, you know, sort of wanting to tear down the world and move towards the left is gradually coming unstuck, because that is no longer the kind of revolution that young people want to be part of. They want to almost declare their fascination with their own nation, their own way of life. They're trying to find their place in the world, and they're reacting against the dominant cultural institutions everywhere in the West.
This is fascinating. I sense we'll speak again on this, Frank, and thank you for your time as ever. Frank Furedi, author and sociologist. I think this is a really interesting period to be in. I mean, there's some always areas of concerns when things, when we get seismic changes in things, and what you'd call the sort of legacy political parties of the Conservatives and Labour, a sense that you want something more. Now, I think that premise, if that's the title of the debate, deserves a lot of analysis. I don't think it's as simple as, well, they all say the same thing, you can't trust them. There's a lot of cliche in that, but there's also some truth. But I sense that the picture is a little more complex. I think there's lots of other things going on. You'd have to, within that, you'd have to look at everything from the cost of living, you'd have to look at everything from batty crazy laws, you'd have to look at everything around the issue of immigration. These issues which were seen as almost side dish points, you know, they weren't, most people don't think about that, you know, which is how the kind of Tories and Labour have got away with it for so long, because they haven't been issues that have had the right kind of publicity and profile and open debate in the same way, and different people joining the debate. You know, you've got 38,000 people row across the channel, and that's not meant to be a point of concern. And again, I'm going to repeat it one more time. Doesn't matter whether you're left wing or right wing. That should be something that bothers the hell out of you. You should be thinking, what, really? They're doing that on an annual basis? 1,000 people over the Christmas 2 or 3 days got in a boat and came to, this is not, it's stuff like that. And that might sound like the most obvious thing, but I think there's more nuances in it. I think those are the kind of the engine room of the problem. I think there's general disquiet in lots of people's lives just about the cost of stuff. You know, we know you can go Christmas shopping. Even if you can afford to buy something, You still note it, you still resent, but nobody wants to be ripped off, even if you've got a few quid. You look at stuff and think, really? That's what that costs just for that? This is insane. It's insanity. We went to, I mentioned this earlier, I know this, you can't really judge what stadiums charge for things as a measure of where life's gone wrong, but it's all relative, I suppose. We went to the O2 to watch this Disney on Ice thing. You know, you get the kind of Toy Story people and Moana on a pair of ice skates singing the songs and doing stuff. It's quite entertaining. A bottle of water, you know, a standard bottle of water, was £4.10p. £4.10p for what you would call a small bottle of water. We actually forgot, we had a rucksack with our own water in it, which we left at home by mistake, you know, trying to get 2 kids out of the house. I don't think it would have mattered because I don't think we would have been allowed in with them. So we had to buy one for £4. We shared a bottle of water, 4 of us. £4.10p. Now, I'm a capitalist. I'm all for free enterprise. That is flipping criminal. And I didn't even, God knows what a portion of chips would have cost or any of that stuff. Look, I know these places don't make the money as obviously as you think. And I shudder to think what the energy bill is of running the O2. I get it, all right? There's a lot of overheads there. It's not like the village hall where they're putting on, you know, Blithe Spirit for a couple of days and you know, a couple of the dads are making the scenery. It's big stuff, I understand that. £4.10 for water. I believe that headline is relevant to the disquiet in our lives, along with many others. Whatever it happens to be, it's all kind of welded in to this mishmash under the headline of the world is upside down. We're in an Alice in Wonderland kind of suspended reality. Something's not quite right. We're off our bearings. And I think people are feeling that. And then some politicians come along and they talk very openly in a different kind of way. They feel accessible. It feels like they're speaking your language. I'm talking about Trump. I'm talking about Farage. I'm talking about people like that. And listen, the left need to take note. And so do the Conservative Party. You really need to take note that times are changing. And we're fed up with people that sing from this kind of groupthink hymn sheet. People want change, real change.